Welcome to Dare Yourself. I'm Nataly Kogan. I'm coming to you from my art studio, and we are here to talk about reinvention, courage, and why action always beats perfection. Today, we are talking about the refusal to accept a mediocre life, even when the world hits you with the unthinkable. I met my guest on an airplane, and within 5 minutes of talking to her, I knew I had to bring her story to you. Cricket, welcome to Dare Yourself.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's get into it. All right, I think I have this right. In a span of a few months, you lost your mom to cancer, you finished your own brutal round of chemo, and then you had your leg amputated below the knee. But
Yes.
you're not just getting by, you're a world-class horse rider, you're like a total adrenaline junkie. And what I learned about you in a few hours that we talked, you're just someone who refuses to let your new life be any less audacious and awesome than your old one. And I'm so excited to talk to you about this. And I want to start with the diagnosis and then
Yes.
the amputation. So you get this news. I think for anyone, like when you told me, anyone listening, it's like, wow, like worst thing ever. So talk us through, how did you react? Like, how did you feel?
So I got a phone call. It was like 9 o'clock at night. And when I answered, and I saw it said MUSC, which is the Medical University of South Carolina, where they did surgery on my foot on what they thought was a non cancerous tumor. And it had been over 2 weeks. The pathology hadn't come back. And when I answered the phone and heard Dr. Letty's voice, I was like, this can't be good to receive a phone call at 9 o'clock at night. And, immediately I knew. And so he told me, he said, listen, it came back, it's cancerous. And he said, we need to do some scans. Hopefully it's isolated to your foot. But the good news is, if that's the case, I'm willing to throw the word cure out there. He said, it's not a word I throw out, you know, early. He said, but if it's in your foot. And I said, well, so you think that, we can remove the rest of the tumor? And because they were only able to remove 5 inches of an 11-inch tumor. And he said, no, we'll need to amputate your leg. And so it was like, wow, bam. In 2 minutes, I now had a very deadly cancer. But if it was isolated to my foot, I could survive the cancer and lose the leg. And so you're sort of caught in this, am I grateful for this? Or, you just told me you're going to cut off my leg. And he was excited about it. And so I felt like I needed to be excited about it. And then I got off the phone and I was just, luckily, my husband and kids happened to not be here that night. I was here by myself and it gave me a little time. It was on December 22nd. So he's blowing this at me a few days before Christmas. All the hospitals are going to be closed for the next, couple of days because I wanted my scans done immediately. And I didn't want to tell my kids until I knew it was isolated to my foot. And so then I spent the next couple hours reading about, I had a round cell myxoid liposarcoma.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow, this is not good. And yeah, it was a bombshell. It was a lot
Hmm.
thrown at me. I had been, an equestrian was what I sort of did as a career. And I stopped that when I had kids. I've always been really active physically. Never, ever. I thought a lot of things could happen to me. Never did I consider that I
Hmm.
was going to lose a leg. And I wasn't sure which was the tougher blow, cancer or an amputation.
I mean, I'm listening to you and I heard you tell me the story on the plane, and you have, like, even as you're telling it, I mean, it's not something any of us imagine, right? And you get both of these at the same time. You said, I think I'm remembering this correctly. You told me that you had some time to process because your family wasn't there. And then you talked about, you have this 10-minute rule. I think I remember it right. That you give yourself, okay, talk to us about the 10-minute rule because you did
So
it.
the 10-minute rule exists, I think, eternally in a situation like this. That, well, first I decided that I was giving myself 3 days to process. Christmas was 3 days away. I didn't want to ruin anyone's Christmas. And so I was like, I'm just going to process this and figure out how I feel about it. And even now, the 10 minutes, sometimes you feel you walk into a difficult situation And you just are like, why am I having to do this? And I'm like, give yourself 10 minutes in the shower. If you want to cry it out, cry it out. If you want to find another way to deal with it, find another way. And oddly enough, I would say showering itself is one of the things that makes me want to take that 10 minutes. If I travel somewhere, at my house, I have things set up. It's very easy. I have something I can grab onto. I hop in the shower. When you travel, I mean, I've gone to a friend's house that literally is just granite and glass, and I have to crawl into the shower
Mm.
and, try and either stand up bracing myself or sit on the floor of the shower taking a shower. I'm 49 years old and I just crawled into a shower. I mean, I don't have a shower leg, but that's one of the many difficulties of being an amputee. I probably have more legs than the average amputee. A shower leg just is not one of them. So I probably need to put it next on my list, but it's very difficult to get insurance to cover things like this, and everything's so expensive.
So we'll talk about that. And I want you to talk about all the different legs you have because you were telling me, you were educating me on our flight. The reason I wanted you to just talk about I remember you saying you took 3 days and 10 minutes is, often when something bad happens, we kind of feel like we have to stuff our emotions away, but actually letting yourself feel them, giving yourself, okay, I'm just going to cry for 10 minutes, or I'm just going to just
Right.
get down on it for 3 days is actually important and helpful.
I think that if I didn't give myself those 10 minutes, and sometimes I'm mad. Sometimes you're sad. Sometimes I'm just irritated by it or frustrated or, all the different emotions. And so, and for me, maybe it started because I have kids. And throughout all of this, that was my biggest concern. My biggest worry about getting my leg cut off was that my kids were going to be embarrassed by me, right? They're not embarrassed by me. And I think you have to deal with the emotions that come with it.
Yeah,
And
for
it's
sure.
really hard unless you have a bunch of amputee friends, which I don't, to even have somebody else that can relate to what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that and kind of your desire to share more and connect with more amputees and share your message. But before we do that, when we were sitting on the plane, you were telling me you said you were an equestrian, you've always been really physically active. And then you started to tell me all these things that you've done since you had your leg amputated, like these
Yes.
physical challenging things that I have both of my legs. And I was just like, whoa, okay. So the first thing I want you to do is tell us some of the things that you've done since your
So
leg was amputated.
I decided, I think you have to make a choice. You're either going to get after it or you're just going to succumb to it. It was about 11 months that I had one leg. From the time of my surgery, I had about a 3-week window in April that I had a hard time recovering from the surgery while I was going through chemotherapy. So I was on a knee scooter. During that 3-week window was when we had my mom's funeral. So I was able to walk for mom's funeral, which was amazing. And then 2 days after her funeral, I had my leg amputated. And I had a really hard time healing from that, probably because my body had just been beat down. So it was almost exactly a year before I was fully walking on a prosthetic leg. When you can't walk for almost a year, it's really hard, especially when you're somebody that's always been so active. So it started because I decided that I was going to make a photo album for my orthopedic oncologist office so that the next time he tells someone he's going to cut their leg off, I wanted him to hand them this photo album and be like, okay, we're going to have to cut your leg off. Look at this. I'll be back in 10 minutes. And it would have a photo of everything that I did in the first year. So my first activity, which sounds really silly, was bowling. I'm missing my right leg. I'm right handed. And that's the leg that you have to you bend your knee and trying to keep my balance. So it seems silly that that was the first activity, but it was. And I went through month 3 was snow skiing. I love to snow ski. And so we always went on a trip in February. And so I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. And horseback riding may have been month 2, just, getting on a horse, seeing what it felt like, trying to get comfortable with it. Um,
And you're doing this just so you're doing this like you have a prosthetic leg. So you're talking
Mhm.
about snow skiing and horseback riding and bowling with a prosthetic leg.
Yes. And water skiing. I've been a water skier my whole life on one ski. And so my brother cut a big piece of a pool noodle and we zip tied it on the ankle of my leg because I was scared it was going to fall off and sink and I would lose it. And then I put on one of his massive shoes so that my foot would like stay put. My right leg I always put in the back of the ski. That was probably one of the best moments. Was not that I got up first try, but the amazing thing was here I was talking about being worried about what my kids would say. And my daughter was driving the boat, and my son and their cousin, they were in the boat. So they're like my cheering squad in there. And you know how kids forget that they're being recorded or anything like that. So here they're taking this video. The backdrop of the video was my kids, and they're like, oh my gosh, mom. Like one of them actually said, mom is such an inspiration. And I was like, wow, that was pretty big.
That's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And of course, of course that's how they feel. It is incredibly inspiring, Cricket. The reason I was like, wait, she has to come on the podcast is you said it. When something terrible like that happens to us, we have a choice, right? And you chose to live with a capital L. I didn't know about the photo album for your orthopedic oncologist. What a great bigger why to stretch for. But like, you chose to live and you're doing all these things that you love with your family. It's not always an easy choice for people. And one thing you told me, I remember, is you said that you've seen a lot of people in similar situations, except a mediocre life.
Yes. At my
Can you talk
prosthetist
about,
office.
yeah, can you talk about like why you feel that happens? And if there's anyone listening, it doesn't have to be someone who's an amputee, but someone who's gone through something challenging like this. Talk about like why you feel people make that choice and kind of your advice for making the choice you made.
So I have to go to my prosthetist office a lot because, like I said, I'm trying to get as many. You need a leg for everything, and I've been very lucky that he's wonderful, and I've been able to get a lot. But when I've been in there, I'm one of the people that wanders around the office and goes into everybody's room. Like, hi, I'm Cricket. How'd you lose your leg? And so many of them are like still in wheelchairs. Just recently I was there and I walk in, this super nice man that I'm talking to, and I was like, oh, are you getting your first leg? Because I saw the wheelchair. And he said, oh, no, sugar, I've been an amputee for 7 years. And I said, well, why are you using, what's the wheelchair for then? And he's like, well, I just, I don't wear it very much. And I figured out it's just a combination of things. One, it's extremely difficult to stay in a well-fitting socket. Like you have to work at it. They're constantly changing, especially in the early, I'm still in the early stages of it. And two, like you said, just that motivation and zest for life. I feel like you just have to have some kind of goal to make yourself get out there and do it. And without that, I don't know how you would get yourself to do it. I knew immediately when my leg got cut off that my goal the next summer was to climb a mountain in Canada. I've climbed every year of my life. I couldn't do it that summer because I still didn't have a leg. And I did it this past summer. And I remember getting to the top of the mountain and, trying not to cry because I was like, gosh, I just wasn't sure if I was ever going to see that view again. It makes me just think about seeing it.
No, it's amazing. And I mean, I feel like I'm climbing it with you. And just what you said, Cricket, about having a goal for which you fight, for which I
Yeah.
think it's so, so important and something we don't talk about enough, that when something difficult happens, yes, you got to feel your feelings. It's really important. You got to allow yourself that. But then you have to have something like your future vision that is pulling you.
But I don't think they think it's possible a lot of times. There's another amputee that I stay in touch
Mm,
with. She lost her leg about 3 weeks before me, and she just sent me a message a few weeks ago. And she had seen this leg that I had received a grant for. She's like, how did you get that? And we start talking, and she was saying how her liner has a hole in it. I'm
mm.
like, how can you be walking around with a leg with a liner that has a hole in it. She said, well, insurance gave me this one and they won't give me another one. I said, it doesn't work that way. And I started Googling the laws in the state that she lives in and sending her copies of it. And not only are they required to give her new ones, in her state, they're required to give you two legs.
Mm,
And she had no idea. It's a lot of work to figure it out and figure out how to navigate it. I get denied for everything,
mm.
generally 3 times. And then I get on the phone with the physician in my insurance company, is always the next step. I request to have a face to face. And my first question is always, so what leg are you missing? And they're like, well, no, I'm not an amputee.
Uh-huh.
How can you make that decision if you're not an amputee?
Yeah. Oh, I like
So
that.
it's
Smart.
hard to navigate.
Yeah, well, what you're describing, Cricket, to me, you're describing really having hopefulness. And hopefulness is not, we mistake hope with optimism. It's not. There's actually, I'm really fascinated by a lot of research on what hopefulness really is. It's actually three things. It's having a goal that you care about, climbing a mountain, going water skiing with your kids, right? It's being willing to try different ways to get there, which is what you're talking about, right? Like just try different ways, right? And two, it's being willing to stay the course and actually
Yes.
like do those things, right? So to me, you're this epitome, and that's what you're talking about. What would you say to someone, again, it doesn't have to be an amputee, but someone who, maybe something rough has happened to them. Maybe it's a health thing, maybe it's a life thing. And they're kind of in this place where I feel a lot of people get stuck of like, why did this happen to me? And it's almost like they can't get out of it.
Right.
What would you say?
And I I think that you have to look at it. You're going to have a different life, right? Your life is going to be a different life. I think once you accept that fact, then you can look at all of the challenges and the rewards that you can find in that different life. I never thought that I would be excited about the fact that I went bowling. Been doing it my whole life. And so I think that instead of looking at the big picture, you just have to start a little bit smaller and rely on yourself, not other people. Friends are amazing. There's nothing in the world like friends. But sometimes when you're going through something like that, you can have the smallest personal goal. Other people don't even need to know that it was a personal
Mm,
goal, right? My first time I walked my dog around the block. I've been walking the dog around the block forever. For me, it was kind of a big deal.
hmm
And then don't be ashamed to be proud of yourself.
I think that's really powerful. And also, you said it, right? You have to accept that things are now different. But also, what I'm hearing from you is you have to look for greatness in that, wonderfulness in that, like new things that make you proud of yourself or grateful to be able to do, which in a way, I always hesitate to say this a little bit, but in a way is a gift, right? Because I don't love the idea of silver lining so much, but I'm a big believer in that when we are grateful for things in whatever situation, it makes it easier for us to move forward. And to me, that's what you're talking about is
Definitely.
like acceptance. This has happened. So not
Yeah.
marinating for years and why did this happen? Okay,
Your
like
10
I
your 10 minutes is where you get to get rid of the why and feel sorry for yourself and then move on and find something exciting that can make you proud of yourself.
and then the other thing you and I were talking about this on the plane where you are really passionate about sharing your story and talking to other people in similar situations to help them make this choice, the more hopeful, the more life with a capital L choice.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that and why, like, that's a new purpose for you, right? That didn't exist before this happened to you. How could it?
No, and it's such a world that I knew nothing about. I still am learning so much about it, and I just feel like that has to, if you ask yourself the why, like you were saying, a lot of people, I mean, have I ever asked myself? Of course I have. Maybe there is no why, but maybe it's so that because I am going to be driven in a positive manner and I want to be able to help other people. And I would say it started because I had a hard time finding other people. Reaching out, I reached out to a lot of amputees that were friends of friends or anything like that. And honestly, none of them responded. And I've met a few since that, that have been great. But I feel like It would have been so much easier if I had found somebody that could have helped me navigate it a little bit better. Silly things. Can I shave my leg? What if I nick it while I'm shaving it and then it turns into this infection and then they have to cut off more of my leg? Those are the thoughts that would go through my head.
Mm,
And you can go on the internet, but that's like worst case scenario. You're going to lose the whole leg if you shave it, if you look on the internet.
yes, trauma,
Yeah.
trauma. Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I just felt like that would have really helped me navigate this if I had been able to have some other people that were kind of new at it.
But also, I think that's really true. And I think the other piece of it, and again, I'm obviously not in that situation, but I think one of the greatest ways that we can help each other is by sharing our story. And you give a lot of hope. And I think that's one of the hardest things, as we talked about, that happens when something really unthinkable like that happens. I think we lose hope. People lose hope.
Yeah.
And I think by sharing your story, you give people hope, not through some slogans on a wall, but by like, hey, this is what I'm doing,
Right.
right? This is how I'm living my life. And that gives someone an example they can follow.
I I hope that I can. Yes, I want to. I feel like it helps drive me. It helps drive me to to set more goals, and I want to be able to convince other people to. A few people that I've spoken to through websites that have reached out to me or anything like that, they focus so far ahead in their life. How am I going to be 80 years old with one leg? I'm not thinking about that. You know what I mean? Like, is that what's keeping them from going out and trying to do things? And, then they see all these athletes that a year after getting a leg or are running, competitive sports but they have access to so much that just the average person doesn't have access to,
Yeah.
whether it's the
Yeah.
PT or the prosthetics or so just your normal person. I think, yeah, just having somebody that they can ask those questions to, or maybe I can say to them, hey, let's try and do this biathlon, like a little mini one and give them a reason to get out there and do stuff.
Yeah.
And it gives me a reason.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's one of the greatest gifts we have in the world is to share our lives and uplift others, right? And that's what you're doing. And I just want to tell you, Cricket, again, and me and most of my listeners, most of my community are not in the same situation. You're an inspiration without someone having to be an amputee because there are many, many people who get stuck in, well, this is impossible for me, or why did this happen to me? Why is my life like that?
Right.
And they don't have to be amputees to be really inspired by just your unwillingness to accept a mediocre life, no matter what. I'm inspired by that.
Thank you. I'm trying. I'm
Well,
trying.
you're doing it. You named, okay. The last question I want to know, what's your next goal? What's the next thing?
I think it needs to be. I used to like to do a lot of sprint, like biathlons and triathlons. So I feel like doing one of those should probably, they're shortened where it's a 3 mile run or and a 3 mile bike ride and a swim, something like that. Or I live on the coast. So a lot of them involve kayaking and running. Or so I feel like is the next.
Well, I can't wait to see you do it, Cricket. Thank you so much for being here. And
Thank
mostly,
you.
Cricket, thank you for showing all of us, again, in all kind of life situations, like what it looks like to dare yourself to like live your life with a capital L, even when it's hard. You are a force. You're a total force. And one of the greatest gifts that you've given me and everyone who's listening, and just you're such a powerful reminder that we always have a choice in how we show up for our own lives. Like we
I
always
think
have that choice.
100%. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. All right, listeners, here's your dare for today. At the end of every episode, you get a dare, and today's dare is inspired by Cricket's story. Look, we all have something that might feel kind of like a dead end, maybe a loss of something or a setback at work or a change in your life you didn't ask for. And it's very easy to get stuck there. So today, I'm challenging you to dare yourself to move forward, even when things are important. So use Cricket's 10-minute rule. Okay. You can do it in the shower. Use her 10-minute rule. Like, give yourself 10 minutes to feel frustrated, to cry, to get annoyed, whatever it is. And then choose to move forward. Choose to take a step forward. Just dare yourself to take the next step. If you found this conversation valuable, please hit follow on YouTube and subscribe, and share this episode with one person who needs a little bit more audacity to live their life. I'm Nataly Kogan, and I'll be back soon with another episode of Dare Yourself.